Reporter accuses Muhammad Ali of being a coward on air. His calm response leaves them speechless. The studio lights burned hot against the champ's skin, but the heat coming from the man across the desk was colder than ice. The host leaned in, eyes gleaming with malice. "You ran away, didn't you?" The atmosphere in the television studio is suffocating as seasoned reporter Arthur Sterling prepares to ambush Muhammad Ali with a calculated, reputation-destroying interview. The air inside the television studio was thick, a heavy blanket of cigarette smoke and nervous perspiration that clung to the back of the throat. It was 1967, a year when the world felt like it was splitting violently down the middle, and right in the center of the fissure sat Muhammad Ali. He sat in a low leather chair that seemed too small to contain his frame. His shoulders broad and still, his face a mask of supreme, unbothered calm. But everyone else in the room, the cameramen wiping their palms on their trousers, the producers pacing in the shadows, the audience shifting in their seats, felt the vibration of a coming storm. Across from Ali sat Arthur Sterling. Sterling was a man of the establishment, sharp-featured and graying, wearing a suit that cost more than most men in Harlem made in a year. He held a stack of index cards in his hands like a weapon, shuffling them with a sharp, rhythmic thwip, thwip, thwip. He wasn't just a journalist. To many watching at home, he was the gatekeeper of American propriety, the man who decided who was a hero and who was a villain. Tonight, he had decided, before the cameras even rolled, which role the man across from him would play. Sterling adjusted his glasses, checking the monitors. He looked at Ali not with curiosity, but with the predatory focus of a hunter spotting a wounded animal. He believed Ali was vulnerable. Stripped of his title, facing prison, vilified by the press, the champ was supposed to be desperate. Sterling smiled, a thin, tight expression that didn't reach his eyes. He signaled to the floor manager. The red light atop camera 1 blinked to life. The trap was set. The cage door was locked. But Sterling, in his arrogance, had forgotten one crucial thing. You do not lock yourself in a cage with a lion and expect to hold the key. Summary. The interview begins with Sterling launching a series of veiled insults disguised as questions, attempting to frame Ali's conscientious objection as simple fear. "Good evening," Sterling began, his voice that familiar baritone that drifted into living rooms across the country, soothing and authoritative. "Tonight, we have a guest who needs no introduction, though perhaps he needs some explanation." He turned to Ali, his body language open but his eyes hard. "Muhammad Ali, or as many still know you, Cassius Clay." Ali didn't flinch. He didn't correct the name, not yet. He just watched Sterling with eyes that seemed to see right through the camera lens, past the glass, and into the soul of the man sitting 3 feet away. "I am who I say I am," Ali said softly, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the studio mics. Sterling chuckled, a dry, condescending sound. "Of course. But names are just labels, aren't they? It's actions that define a man. And your actions lately, well, they have been the subject of much debate." Sterling leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, invading Ali's personal space. "You were the heavyweight champion of the world, the symbol of strength, the pinnacle of masculine power. And yet, when your country called upon you to serve, to fight for freedom, you refused." The audience was dead silent. You could hear the hum of the ventilation system. Sterling let the silence hang there, letting the accusation marinate. "Some people," Sterling continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "say that it isn't about religion at all. They say it isn't about politics. They say, Muhammad, that you are simply afraid, that you are happy to fight in a ring with a referee and gloves and rules. But when it comes to a real fight, a fight with real bullets and real stakes. You folded. Ali remained motionless. His hands were folded gently in his lap. He looked like a statue carved from obsidian. He didn't interrupt. He didn't shout. He let Sterling pour the poison. Is that it? Sterling pressed, sensing blood. Is the self-proclaimed greatest actually a coward when the bell rings for a fight he can't control? The word hung in the air. Coward. It was the ultimate insult for a fighter. In any gym from Louisville to Philly, that word would get your jaw broken. Sterling sat back, smug, waiting for the explosion. He wanted the angry black man. He wanted the rant. He wanted Ali to lose his cool so he could point a finger and say, "See? He has no discipline." But Ali just blinked, slowly. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of his lips. It wasn't a smile of amusement. It was the smile a grandmaster gives a novice who just moved his queen into a trap. Summary: Sterling intensifies his attack, bringing up financial losses and public disapproval, mistaking Ali's silence for defeat, while the tension in the room reaches a breaking point. Sterling mistook the silence for stunned submission. He pressed the advantage, his voice rising in volume and tempo. He waved a card in the air. I have here quotes from veterans, men who lost legs, men who lost eyes. They ask me, Arthur, why does this man get to live in luxury while we bleed in the mud? What do you say to them, Muhammad? What do you say to the mother who lost her son last week while you sit here in a tailored suit? The reporter was pacing now, metaphorically. He was circling the ring, throwing combinations. You've lost your title. You've lost millions of dollars. You've been banned from boxing. And for what? A point of view? A stubborn refusal to accept reality? Sterling gestured to the audience, inviting them to join his judgment. It seems like a high price to pay just to avoid danger. Most men would call that self-preservation. But heroes make sacrifices. Heroes go where they are sent. The camera zoomed in on Ali's face. The producers in the booth were holding their breath. This was good television. This was the destruction of an idol. Sterling was relentless. You talk about your people. You talk about standing up for the black man in America. But aren't you letting them down? By stripping yourself of your platform? By showing them that the way to handle responsibility is to turn your back on it? Sterling was flushed now. High on his own rhetoric. He felt he was winning. He felt he was dismantling the myth of Muhammad Ali piece by piece. Admit it, Sterling said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. You aren't a revolutionary. You're a celebrity who got scared. You saw the newsreels, you saw the body bags, and you decided your life was worth more than the boys from Kansas or the boys from the Bronx. You're a coward, Ali. A rich, pampered coward. The studio crew looked away, uncomfortable. It was too raw, too personal. Sterling had crossed the line from journalism into prosecution. He sat back again, chest heaving slightly, waiting for the concession, waiting for Ali to hang his head. Ali uncrossed his legs. He shifted forward just an inch. The leather of the chair creaked, a sound that cracked like a gunshot in the silent room. He looked at Sterling, and for the first time, the reporter felt a flicker of genuine fear. There was no anger in Ali's eyes. There was only a profound, ancient weight, a weight that had carried stones for pyramids and cotton sacks for empires. You finished, Arthur? Ali asked. The voice was soft, melodic, but it carried the finality of a judge's gavel. Summary. Ali finally speaks, delivering a calm, philosophical dismantling of Sterling's worldview, redefining courage and exposing the hypocrisy of the establishment. You finished, Ali repeated, the question lingering. He didn't wait for an answer. He looked out at the audience, then back to Sterling, his gaze steady and unblinking. "You talk about fear," Ali began, his voice gaining that rhythmic cadence, like a drumbeat starting slow. "You talk about cowards. You sit there in that chair, with your makeup on your face, and your insurance, and your script, and you ask me about fear." Ali leaned in. "I am a fighter. I have been hit by the hardest punchers God ever put breath into. I have tasted my own blood. I have had my jaw wired shut. You think I am afraid of a man with a gun? You think I am afraid of dying?" Ali shook his head, a gesture of pity. "Man, I face death every time I step through those ropes. Death don't scare me. What scares me is living a lie. What scares me is losing my soul." Sterling opened his mouth to interrupt, but Ali raised a single finger. The motion was gentle, yet it silenced the room instantly. "You call me a coward because I won't go shoot people who never did nothing to me," Ali continued, his voice rising in power, resonating off the studio walls. "You want me to go halfway around the world and kill brown people to keep the white slave master rich. You call that bravery? I call that slavery. I call that blindness." Ali stood up. He didn't rush. He rose like a mountain rising from the mist. Sterling shrank back in his seat, suddenly looking very small. "You say I let my people down?" Ali gestured to the camera, addressing the millions watching. "I gave up my title. I gave up my money. I gave up the cheering crowds. I faced prison. I faced hate. I faced men like you who want to tear me down every day. I did that not because I was scared, but because I was brave enough to say no." He looked down at Sterling. "It takes no courage to do what everybody else is doing. It takes no courage to follow orders. A robot can follow orders. A dog can follow orders. But a man chooses. A man stands on his own 2 feet even when the whole world is trying to knock him down." The studio was electric. The cameramen had stopped checking their focus. They were just watching. "You ask why I don't fight in your war," Ali said, his voice dropping to a whisper that screamed. "I am fighting a war. I am fighting for the dignity of the black man. I am fighting for the right to worship my God. I am fighting for truth. And my battlefield is right here. My battlefield is everywhere. A man is told he is nothing. You think I lost everything? Arthur, I gained everything. I gained my freedom. You sit there in your suit, trapped by your sponsors, trapped by your station, trapped by what people expect you to say. You are the prisoner. I am the free man." Ali leaned down, his face inches from Sterling's. "So you tell me, Arthur. Who is the coward? The man who loses his fortune to keep his soul? Or the man who sells his soul to keep his job?" Summary. The aftermath of Ali's speech leaves Sterling humiliated and speechless, shifting the power dynamic entirely as the studio audience realizes they have witnessed a historic moment. The question hung in the air, vibrating like the hum of a struck bell. Or the man who sells his soul to keep his job? Sterling's mouth opened, then closed. He looked down at his index cards, his weapon, and realized they were useless. They were just paper. Words written by someone else, for a script that had just been burned to ash. He looked up at Ali, searching for a comeback, a witty retort, anything to regain control of the broadcast. But his mind was blank. The intellectual scaffolding he had built to trap Ali had collapsed under the weight of sheer, unadulterated truth. Sterling stammered. Well, the law is... the law." "The law?" Ali laughed, but it wasn't mocking anymore. It was joyous. It was the laugh of a man who has walked through fire and come out unburnt. "Laws change, Arthur. Justice doesn't. You remember that." The audience, previously paralyzed by the tension, began to stir. It started with a single clap from the back of the room, maybe a stagehand, maybe a brave soul in the bleachers. Then another. Then a murmur of agreement that swelled into a rumble. They weren't cheering for a boxer. They were cheering for a man who had just spoken the things they were too afraid to think. Sterling looked around, panic flaring in his eyes. He signaled frantically to the floor manager to cut to commercial, to kill the feed, to save him from this exposure. But the red light on camera 1 stayed on. The producer in the booth, mesmerized, didn't call the cut. He let the camera linger on the tableau, the beautiful, defiant black man standing tall, and the shrinking establishment figure crumbling in his chair. Ali buttoned his suit jacket. He adjusted his tie with agonizing slowness. He looked at Sterling one last time, not with anger, but with the dismissal one gives to a gnat. "You keep your war, Arthur," Ali said, turning his back on the desk. "I got a people to love." He walked away from the set, moving out of the harsh glare of the studio lights and into the shadows of the wings. The silence he left behind was louder than any cheering crowd. Sterling sat alone in the pool of light, clutching his cards, a man who had tried to punch a ghost and shattered his hand against a wall of stone. Summary: Ali leaves the studio, interacting with a working-class cleaner, cementing the idea that his true power comes from his connection to the people, not the establishment. Ali pushed through the heavy double doors at the back of the studio, stepping into the cool, concrete hallway. The noise of the studio, the scrambling producers, the buzzing equipment, faded instantly. Here, it was quiet. An old black woman was mopping the floor near the exit. She wore a gray uniform, her back bent from years of labor. She stopped when she saw him. She didn't ask for an autograph. She didn't scream. She just straightened up, resting her hands on the handle of the mop. She looked at him. Really looked at him, with eyes that had seen the same history he carried in his bones. She nodded, a slow, solemn dip of her chin. "You told him, champ," she whispered. "You told him good." Ali stopped. The fire that had consumed the studio set faded from his eyes, replaced by a warmth that was soft and genuine. He walked over to her, towering over her small frame, and gently touched her shoulder. "I told him for us, Mama," he said softly. "I told him for us." He pushed open the rear exit door and stepped out into the night air of the city. It was cold, and the streetlights hummed, casting long shadows on the pavement. He had no title belt around his waist tonight. He had no check in his pocket. He didn't know if he would ever fight again. The future was a fog of court dates and uncertainty. But as he walked down the street, his head high, his stride rhythmic and loose, he looked like a king. He had faced the accusation of the world and refused to flinch. He had turned the weapon of their judgment into a shield of his own dignity. The reporter had called him a coward, but tonight, Muhammad Ali had never been braver. The world was watching, and whether they loved him or hated him, they would never, ever forget what he said.